I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to know that I have a patient on this clock about 10 hours to speak. Friends, I started out a few months ago talking about distinguished Baha'i women. And I deliberately set Martha Ruth aside and I said, I need a lot more than 10 minutes, 15 minutes to talk about Martha Ruth. So a couple of weeks ago I was in Houston and I decided I would do a 1-hour presentation on Martha Ruth. And I realized here, after I put this presentation together, that I still have way too much stuff, way too much material about Martha Ruth. So I'm going to try to give you some highlight of her life, tell you a little bit more about her, things that you probably have not heard about her. But what I want to tell you at the inception of this thing, that I'm exhausted reading about Martha Ruth. The fact that she traveled so much, that she went so many different places. And I want to start this presentation by telling you that in 1912, when she was meeting with Abdu'l-Baha, it was discovered that she had breast cancer. Very young person with breast cancer, and apparently the breast cancer got taken care of, got cured. Nevertheless, she was always sick. She was always ill when she was traveling. She was never in good health. And yet, dear friends, she traveled so much. She went to so many different places that again, it is exhausting to see her travels. I go from here to Israel on a plane, and it's like 15 hours of traveling, and I'm exhausted. And I'm like, she was traveling for days on ship. There were no planes. She was traveling by sea. And she was traveling third class. She was traveling the cheapest way possible to save money. And just thinking about her is amazing. So in thinking about Martha Ruth, I decided I would divide her life into distinct stages. Martha Ruth, the fun-loving young person that was called Maddie by everybody. She was young, she was going to college, she was having a good old time, and then becoming a Baha'i is the second stage in her life. But the most important thing that happened in her life is that she came to meet with Abdu'l-Baha in 1912. And 1912, after meeting with Abdu'l-Baha, is a story of complete and total transformation. And whatever she accomplished after that was after this great rebirth, being born again almost, being recreated again by Abdu'l-Baha, that essentially led her to what she did. But her travels really took off when her father died and she inherited a bunch of money from her father. And that's when she took off and traveled a lot. She used all her own money. She traveled cheaply. And as you know, she was a newspaper reporter, so wherever she went, she was writing articles and submitting those articles for publication and making a little bit of money with it. But she took care of all her own expenses. So Martha Ruth was born in 1872 in a little town of Richwood, Ohio. Her father, T.T. Ruth, was a deacon of the Baptist church, a well-known person, a very distinguished person in a small town. Martha Ruth was essentially the only person in her family that went to college. Her two brothers did not. Her father was thought of as a cold, not a very affectionate, outwardly affectionate person, yet he showed great affection for his one daughter, Martha. You know, fathers and daughters have special places. I mean, they just do. He had a very special place for her, and she convinced him and talked him into going to college. Nobody in the 1870s, 1880s, born in that time, was going to college, let alone a girl from a small Midwestern town. I mean, the notion that she would go to college was almost hard to imagine. I'm going to run through this because I have so much stuff. You guys can read it as we go, okay? You are reading it, right? Again, I think you should provide coffee before we talk. She was not very domestic. I mean, in those days, women did certain things around the house. She could not cook, she could not sew, she could not do pretty much anything that you would expect a woman of her time to be able to do. She did none of those things. She talked her father into letting her go to the college next door, Allegheny College, and he let her go. She talked him into it. Once she got there, she decided that wasn't big enough for her, so she was going to Oberlin College, a bigger college. She spent 5 years in Oberlin College studying all these things, Greek, French, German, English, Latin, rhetoric, etc. She studied all this and then took off and went to the University of Chicago to get a bachelor's degree. She never finished it at the college she started. Again, think of the time in which we're talking here. Think about the time in which she was doing this. It is difficult to imagine that a woman in that time, in the 1880s, the year 1900, Midwestern Chicago, Midwestern Illinois, Midwestern anywhere, would be able to do this. She went to work in Pennsylvania as a school teacher. She did that for a short time and then went to work for a newspaper as a reporter. What did she report on? She reported on automobiles. Just imagine, automobiles are a woman's, not a man's world, not something a woman would do. She reported on automobiles. She traveled to Paris to attend an auto show. Again, remember, she was traveling alone at this time. It is hard to imagine how audacious and brave she must have been. So she worked for the Pittsburgh Gazette. She was at a conference as a reporter, Christian conference, where Roy Wilhelm was present. And when the conference broke up, everybody headed off to a restaurant next to the conference center, and it was quite busy and people were sitting, quite close to each other. Roy Wilhelm overheard the conversation and basically jumped in to say something to them. And so she talked to Roy Wilhelm and figured out that he was a Baha'i, and he started mailing her stuff to read. And pretty quickly, by 1909, she was a Baha'i. The first thing she did after she became a Baha'i, she wrote a long article for the Pittsburgh Gazette about the history and principles and ideas of the Baha'i Faith and had it published. She also went to the Baha'i Annual Convention in 1911. The thing that really transformed her, the thing that really changed her, was coming to the presence of Abdu'l-Baha. She was a completely different person. She was enjoying life. She was very focused on her career. She wrote an article that was published in her hometown newspaper about this young woman who is desperately in love with this man, then she wants to get married, but unfortunately she is also very ambitious and wants a career and wants to advance a career. Therefore, she gives up the idea of marriage and children and family to pursue her career. And people often say that that was her personal life story. I don't know if it was a personal life story. Nevertheless, she did publish that article. And here it was, after meeting Abdu'l-Baha, she just gave up all those things that are normal, that are common at that time. She went, the reading that he just had, going from copper to gold, that transformation is difficult. She was the person that went from copper to gold overnight after meeting Abdu'l-Baha. While he was in the East Coast, she went almost every place that Abdu'l-Baha went to be in his presence, to hear him talk. She went to the conference in Englewood, New Jersey, where Abdu'l-Baha declared the Day of the Covenant and the City of the Covenant, etc. She was there. She also met with Waliullah Warqa in New York. So Abdu'l-Baha, after he left America, by the way, Shoghi Effendi tells us that Abdu'l-Baha taught that the three most important aspects of his ministry were the tablets of the divine plan, his travels to the west, and the building of the shrine of the Ba. That not as a personal thing, but the most important things that had been accomplished during his lifetime for the faith. Abdu'l-Baha wrote, after he went back from America and Europe, he wrote in 1917, 1918, the Tablets of the Divine Plan. And in the Tablets of the Divine Plan, the first half of it is addressed to the different states. The second half of it, he specifically gives us a list of towns and cities and countries and places that we need to go to. So Martha Ruth's plans, her travels were guided by the tablets of the divine plan. She looked at those and she decided that she wanted to go to as many of those places, as many of those cities and towns as Abdu'l-Baha had mentioned in the tablets of the divine plan. She didn't make it to all of them. And there are some countries and places she added on that were not necessarily in the tablets of the divine plan. But she was following Abdu'l-Baha's injunction, oh, that I could travel even though on foot in the utmost poverty to these regions and raising the call of Ya Baha'u'llah Baha in cities, villages, mountains, deserts, and oceans to promote the divine teaching. This, alas, I cannot do. How intensely I deplore it. Please, God, you may achieve it. And then Martha would remember that call of Abdu'l-Baha, as she herself was to say, and she became the first to arise in response to his call. So she remembered that Abdu'l-Baha wanted to do this. Abdu'l-Baha was unable to do this. Therefore, she decided that she would do some of what Abdu'l-Baha had wanted to do. So in 1911, she wrote to Abdu'l-Baha and said, I wish to go to South America. And Abdu'l-Baha responds back to her. You want to read this? Your detailed letter?
O thou enkindled with the fire of the love of God. Your detailed letter dated November 7th, 1918, was in these days received. The contents produced great joy, for they indicated a benevolent purpose, an untiring effort, and an extended tour around the different parts of the globe. Today, the promulgation of the ideal principles of His Holiness Baha'u'llah, which are manifestly recorded in the books, is the spirit of this age and the cause of the realization of assistance and confirmation. My hope from the blessings of His Holiness Baha'u'llah is that thou mayest forget rest and composure, and like unto a swift-flying bird, mayest cover long distances, and in whatever land thou tarriest, thou mayest reproduce the melody of the kingdom and engage in songs and music in the best of tunes.
That's exactly what she did. She didn't rest for a minute. She didn't stop for a minute. She just kept going. And she went, and I'll point out some of the places she went. So in South America, she went to Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Panama, and Cuba. I'm just exhausted thinking about how much she would. What would she do? She would go to every town that she went to, and she would go try to meet with the newspaper reporters. She would go to the editor of the newspaper and say, I'm a Baha'i, I'm here, let's talk. And she would get them to cover her trip there. She would get them to write up about the Baha'i Faith. And she covered, in every city, every town that she went to, she covered multiple different newspapers. She tried to arrange radio interviews and went on radio stations to be interviewed. She went to universities and colleges and asked them if she could give a talk about the Baha'i Faith. It wasn't that they were waiting on her. She walked in there and said, I'm here, I'm a Baha'i, and I want to talk about the Baha'i Faith on your radio station. When can you interview me? I mean, she was that gutsy, that she was that brave a person. I laugh when I read this. In Pernambuco, she was fortunate in finding an interpreter, meaning that she went to different places where she did not even know the local language. She went, and there wasn't a Baha'i who was there, a local Baha'i who was going to translate for her. She went, she didn't know anybody, she went anyway. Friends, this is sort of the pattern that when you think about the early Persian Baha'is that went all over the world to bring the Baha'i faith, most of them didn't know any of the local languages. They just showed up. They really did. The Persian Baha'is did some of this stuff. And somehow, language was never a barrier. They went out and taught the faith anyway. And so when you think about, I can't talk to this person because he or she doesn't speak the same language I do, don't think about Martha Ruth. Think about what she did. You can talk to anybody, language or no language. They told her not to go to Bahia because there was some kind of illness in Bahia, and she decided she would go pray. She went into her ship, the room of her ship, and she prayed, and she saw Jupiter signing. She said, I'm going. That was a good omen. Her friends told her not to go, not to cross the Andes because it was mountainous, it was dangerous, you had to go on donkeys, and she decided, I'm going anyway. So she went all the way to the top of the world and basically came back down on narrow, mountainous. You know, when you think about some dangerous places to go up the mountain and come down the mountain, she did it. So think about this. On the journey by ship up the western coast of South America, Martha Ruth's supply of 500 booklets, which she had brought with her, gave out. You know, I have 100 booklets I bought. I still have 50 of them left after a year. She got, in 2 weeks, she had given away 500 booklets. She spent a week in Panama on the ship out. She recalled Abdu'l-Baha admonition, roared like a lion, and again summoned up the courage to ask a ship's captain for permission to speak. So you're going on this ship from one city or one town, one country to another. She goes up to the ship's captain and says, "Can I please get all the passengers together and give a talk?" I mean, it's just, I'm blown away by her courage. I'm totally impressed by what a courageous person she was. When Martha Ruth returned from South America, Abdu'l-Baha wrote her, "Thou art in truth a herald of the kingdom and a harbinger of the covenant." That's why the book, Martha Ruth, Herald of the Covenant, that's what Abdu'l-Baha called her. So she came back from this trip to South America and she spent a few months in America, and during the time that she was in America, she became the editor of the Star of the West. I mean, remember what she was doing. While she was traveling, she was writing articles and she was sending them back to the Pittsburgh Gazette, and they were paying her some money. And while they were paying her the money, that's the money that she was, until her father passed away and left her pretty much everything that he owned. Until that time, she was supporting herself by writing articles. So then she went to China. It's for those of you that are planning to go to China. By the way, hi. This Jonathan Ellis just came back from living in 10 years in China. You all, Carol, you need to talk.
I think we've met, actually.
Yeah, okay.
About 10 years ago.
In China?
No, in San Francisco in preparation for China.
Okay. All right. I knew his dad real well, and I know his mom real well. So. Her second great journey was to China, responding to Abdu'l-Baha's eloquent appeals. Abdu'l-Baha wanted people to go to China. China, 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 Abdu'l-Baha said. She decided that she was going to China. So she spent a year in South and Central America. Now she comes back, rests for 9 months, and she's off to China again. Miss Martha Ruth stopped to first visit Agnes Alexander and Ida Finch in Japan, where she gave 20 lectures. You know, there is 20 lectures in a week or 10 days. That's a lot of talks that she gives. And then I'll share with you, she tells us how to go about preparing to give a talk. And I think it's a wonderful formula for how you go about preparing a talk. Miss Martha Ruth stopped to visit, then she spent 6 months in Peking, studying the language and custom of the people, supporting herself by writing for a news syndicate and giving private English lessons. Shoghi Effendi sent her a cable her first week in China saying, "Abdu'l-Baha is guiding you. Success assured, Shoghi." After summer in Beijing, Martha Ruth debated with herself whether to teach English at a university there, which would have given her more security financially, or to travel teach. Finally, she decided on travel teaching, and Shoghi Effendi said that's a good idea. So the choice was between earning money to feed herself and going travel teaching. She took the choice of going travel teaching. She traveled southward from Peking, I keep saying Peking, Beijing to Shanghai, visiting the cities between as she went. She was ill and unable to get out much when she first arrived in Shanghai, so she spent her time writing newspaper articles. Later, as the articles began to appear in the paper, she was able to get speaking engagements. So her articles were appearing in the newspaper, and because her name was in the newspaper, when she went out and said, "I would like to give a talk," people will say, "Oh yeah, we've read your article. Yeah, sure, we'll," you know. So both of those things, her speaking and her writing, were going hand in hand, each supporting the other end there. But she had neither money to go out and buy all the newspapers, as some cost 20 cents a copy. Just think about this. Her articles were appearing in the newspapers, and she could not afford to buy the newspaper at 20 cents a copy. Then she went up the river to Hangzhou and Wuxian. I mean, these are just names for me. I mean, I have no idea where any of this thing, and Carol or probably Jonathan know where all these things are. Friends, I have traveled by ship between Karachi and Bombay. I traveled by ship multiple times. You either had a private cabin, where they provided you with a bed, or you were on deck. On deck, on the lower deck or upper deck, you were on deck. You were required to bring your own bed, because all there was an empty place, and you brought your own bed, and you slept on your own bed. She didn't know that. So she got on the ship imagining that there was a nice place to sleep. There was nothing. So what I'm really trying to convince you, to give you a sense of, is how much she suffered when she was traveling. So she met somebody, a professor who on the ship, who had read her article and therefore invited her to come to the university where he was teaching and allowed her an opportunity to teach at the university. By the time Martha Root left China, she had taught in 19 of the principal cities and nearly 100 universities. From China and Japan, she proceeded to Australia and New Zealand for a 4-month teaching trip. There she traveled with Ernie Baker, Catherine McLaughlin, and Greta Lampro, broadcasting from every large radio station and giving lectures, more than 60 of them in Adelaide, Melbourne, and Sydney, speaking 2, 3, or 4, occasionally 5 times a day. She stopped in South Africa. On her way back from Australia, she decided to go to South Africa. And then from South Africa, she went to Haifa to visit with the Guardian. So, but her most distinguished service, obviously, I mean, you can't decide between distinguished service or otherwise, but certainly her trips to Europe is what became such a huge thing for the Baha'is, especially as her introducing Queen Marie of Romania to the Baha'i Faith. There's a wonderful story. She went to Edinburgh, Danzig, Antwerp, Budapest, Great Britain, Germany. She went to all these places. She went to Romania and tried to get an appointment with Queen Marie, but that was impossible, not because of Queen Marie, because all the underlings under Queen Marie that wouldn't let her get to Queen Marie. So she sent a copy of the book, Baha'u'llah and the New Era, in English through the middle person to Queen Marie. As you know, Queen Marie is a great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria of England. And in those days, royals would marry other royals. So one of the children or grandchildren of Queen Victoria married the King of Romania. So Queen Marie was an English-speaking, an English person who had married into the Romanian royal family. At the time when Martha Root visited with her, the king had just died, so Queen Marie was a widow. The term used to describe the king's wife after the king has passed away is dowager, D-O-W-A-G-E-R. I don't know how you pronounce it, but she was a dowager Queen Marie of Romania. So she was in a tremendous state of sorrow, living in a country that was not her own. It was her adopted country, learning, Queen Marie was in distress. And while she was in distress, she received a copy of Baha'u'llah and the New Era. And she stayed up all night reading it. And the next day she summoned Martha Root to visit with her. Think about how Baha'u'llah is opening the door for Martha Root. She just made the attempt, she made the try, and everything worked out. Of course, Queen Marie, as you know, became a Baha'i, and Queen Marie made some wonderful statements that were published all over the world about her great and tremendous faith in the Baha'i Faith, and how the Baha'i Faith had changed her and given her great spiritual assurance which she needed at the darkest moment of her life, which is the passing of her husband. You have read Queen Marie's statements, you all know this stuff, so I'm going to pass over this. She met President Masaryk, founder of Czechoslovakia. She met Dr. Joseph Kruzinski, president of Lublin University. She met Auguste Farrell, Edmund Privat, Charles Baudin of Switzerland, Principal. I mean, just the names of the people that she met with. Dear friends, nowadays, I want to go meet with the senator, I need permission from the assembly, which is the proper process to follow. We have processes in place. Also, I think sometimes we are just intimidated by the idea of going out and meeting with the governor or the senator or something. I mean, they're ordinary people. They are really ordinary people. Call them and make an appointment. If they see you and Baha'u'llah opens the door, go see them. But always do it with the assembly's permission. If you're going to call anybody distinguished like that, make sure your assembly is aware that you're trying to do it. Nevertheless, dear friend, it is not impossible. You know, John McCain, who just died yesterday, was a great supporter of the Bahá'í Faith. The Baha'is were with him all the time. He met with the Baha'is whenever the Baha'is called on him. Kit Bigelow, who used to run external affairs for us, every time she called on him, he met with her. He got up in the U.S. Senate and sponsored several bills supporting the Baha'is. It's not that very difficult to do these things. All you have to do is try. If Baha'u'llah wants you to meet with somebody, they'll meet with you. So this is what I want you all to think about this. Small wonder that the noted people she interviewed with such interest and enthusiasm were able to speak appreciatively of the Baha'i Faith. They had her for an example. Doris McKay, who knew her, wrote that whoever you were, her love and interest was her introduction to you. There was no one high or low who had not felt that. There was a quiet stateliness in her manner and an element of ceremony. And then I want you to focus on this. She says, make every meeting an occasion, she instructed me. Give something away, if only a flower, some candy or fruit. Pray that they will accept from you the greatest gift. After Europe, she went to Turkey, Egypt, Haifa, Damascus, Iraq, Iran, where she visited the friends and places of Baha'i martyrdom, 2.5 months in India and Burma, Malaya, China, Japan, and Hawaii. I think we need a globe here showing all the dots, connecting all the places that she went to. But she went places, and she was remembered traveling third class on via ocean line or sea. Then she went back to Geneva to attend the disarmament conference. She arranged for the publication of Baha'u'llah in the New Era in Romanian, Greek, Finnish, and a booklet, What is the Baha'i Movement, in Romanian, Finnish, and Icelandic. I think What is the Baha'i Movement was written by Horace Hawley, and she arranged for the publication of those in various languages. Iceland she was the first Baha'i that ever went to Iceland. She was the first Baha'i that went so many places. The history of the Baha'i faith in Iceland, like that of so many countries, begins with Martha Root's lectures. She wrote an article, What is the Baha'i Movement, in the newspaper, and she was invited to meet with people, and she was invited to give talks, and that's how the Baha'i faith got introduced into Iceland. Read this, Brian.
Martha Root was sent back to the United States in the middle of the following year by the Guardian. Her health was broken. They told her to rest. She stayed 2 months with the Wilhelms, recuperating, then began lecturing across the United States, but with a lighter schedule than on the previous tour.
I just want you to remember, the Guardian ordered her to rest. Then in October, Martha Root arrived in India for a 15-month stay, where she lectured from Bombay to Mandalay and from Srinagar to Colombo. So he's basically saying from Mandalay is, north, south, east, west. She went everywhere in India. She visited Rabindranath Tagore and met the Prime Minister of India. More than 200 newspaper articles appeared during her stay in India and Ceylon. She traveled through southern India in the company of Shirin Fojdar, who sang songs of Kuratulayan. In Rangoon, she met with the Baha'i children and gave them the first lessons in Baha'i class, which the Rangoon, by the way, Rangoon is now in Myanmar. It used to be Burma, now it's Myanmar. She met with the Baha'i children and gave them the first lesson in a Baha'i class, which the Rangoon Spiritual Assembly determined to continue in remembrance of her. She spent 3 months in Karachi arranging for the publication and printing of her book, Tahir the Pure. I want to say a few things about this. There was a man in Karachi named Isfandiar Bakhtiyari. I was 18, 19 years old, and Mr. Bakhtiyari was then about 80 something, 80 plus. He was our auxiliary board member. I mean, in those days, for the whole country, we had 2 auxiliary board members. He was our auxiliary board member. And I learned so much from Mr. Bakhtiyari, but one of the things I learned from Bakhtiyari was his 3 months of traveling daily with Manharut. We all would know Tahiri, yes we would, but we would not have known Tahiri the way we do but for the publication of the first book about Tahiri called Tahiri the Pure. And Mr. Bakhtiyari actually financed the publication. She didn't have the money to publish it, so Mr. Bakhtiyari published that book for her, and it has become a standard. There's a line in there that says, "You can kill me, but you cannot stop the emancipation of women," that Tahiri uses, that the Guardian also used in God Passes By. "You can kill me, but you cannot stop the emancipation of women" was first used by Tahiri. But Tahiri translated the poems with some help, translated some of the major poems of Tahiri into English. This was translated by Tahiri with the help of Mr. Bakhtiyari. And so you have the Persian here and you have the English here. But the important thing here to know is that we in the West who speak English would not actually know Tahiri. But we would know of her from God Passes By and a few mentions of her, but we would not know Tahiri the way we did without the publication of this book. I mean, she made Tahiri popular. She did. Anybody know who Rabindranath Tagore is? The first person she met with? He was the first Indian to win Nobel Prize for Literature, Rabindranath Tagore. And Rabindranath Tagore met with Abdu'l-Baha in America. But he's the first Indian to win a Nobel Prize for Literature. She must have been exhausted because she kept going to Australia and New Zealand after that. This is what I want you to know, what she instructs us. She says, and when one is going to give a lecture, when one is going to give a talk, it is important to study, concentrate, meditate. So this is her methodology of preparing a talk. Study, concentrate, meditate. Meaning, pray before you get up and start speaking. If there are times when the words just don't come, and when the words don't come, what you have studied doesn't show up in your mouth, perhaps Baha'u'llah will put the right words in your mouth. And that is what she instructs us to do. Study, meditate, and concentrate. So now she's leaving New Zealand coming back to America, and she's on a ship. She leaves May 29 on a ship called the Mariposa. And she is quite ill. She's very, very ill. Nabil, read that, please.
2 Baha'is on board the Mariposa took care of her, and when the ship reached Honolulu, took her to the home of a Baha'i, where she spent her last months, passing away on September 28, 1939, at age 67, in that symbolic spot, meeting place of East and West. The Guardian wrote to the American believers, the passing of dearest Martha and the circumstances of her severe and painful illness have brought profound sorrow, but I rejoice at the glory and joy that must be hers and which she fully deserves in the Abha paradise. In a cable he announced, posterity will establish her as the foremost hand which Abdu'l-Baha's will has raised up in first Baha'i century. Present generation of her fellow believers, recognize her to be the first, finest fruit which the formative age of the faith of Baha'u'llah has as yet produced.
When she got off the ship, the Mariposa, 2 people had to hold her out so she could walk down. She was not a hand of the cause appointed by the Guardian while she was alive. She was appointed the hand of the cause after she passed away posthumously. But Shoghi Effendi says something here quite amazing, which is what I started with. Will be posterity will establish her as the foremost hand which Abdu'l-Baha's will has raised up. As I said to you, she was transformed by Abdu'l-Baha. She went from being a young, fun-loving person, having a good time, to suddenly becoming this self-sacrificing, self-effacing servant, true servant of Abdu'l-Baha. So when Abdu'l-Baha says, when we say that some of the most important things accomplished in Abdu'l-Baha's time, one of the things was his travels to the West. Yes, truly, because Abdu'l-Baha's visits, you say when Abdu'l-Baha was here, how many people became Baha'is? That's not the point. When Abdu'l-Baha was here, lots of people got suddenly transformed. And this group of God-loving, God-intoxicated people that Abdu'l-Baha had transformed from copper to gold went out and transformed the whole world. The tablets of the divine plan, the first 7-year plan of Shoghi Effendi, everything that we did, these people that had met Abdu'l-Baha and had been completely transformed were the people who went out and changed the world. Tablets of the divine plan were fulfilled by people who had come and had been transformed by Abdu'l-Baha. And she, of all the people that had been transformed by Abdu'l-Baha, was the most distinguished. No one did what she did. It is impossible, dear friend, here in 1 hour to summarize all the things that she did. And in God Passes By, the Guardian's History of the First Baha'i Century, he describes the American Baha'i community as crowned with imperishable glory by the signal international services of Martha Ruth. She had, he said, outshone the feats accomplished by all the propagators of the faith in the course of an entire century. Thus his tribute to Martha Ruth, that archetype of Baha'i itinerant teachers, in the foremost hand of the cause, raised by Baha'u'llah since Abdu'l-Baha's passing, must be awarded if her manifold services and supreme acts of her life are to be correctly appraised, the title of leading ambassadors of the faith and pride of Baha'i teachers, whether men or women in both the East and the West. Dear friends, when I think about those who went out and taught the Baha'i faith around the world, I must tell you, we must acknowledge that a predominating role in this work was played by Baha'i women. We must accept and acknowledge this. Because what Martha Ruth, Dorothy Baker, Keith Ransom Kaler, and Susan Moody, and all these women did was just amazing. It just blows your mind to think that these women, in the time that they were doing it, remember I've told you the story of the woman that wrote Some Answered Questions in Paris Talk. What is her name, man? Laura Clifford Barney. She was 20 years old, 21 years old, when she left Paris and decided that she was going to go see Abdu'l-Baha in Akka. A 20-year-old woman, as soon as she got on the ship, they covered her up in a cloak because they didn't want any of those people seeing her. That was against the customs of the time. Think about how brave and audacious these women are. So if you are studying the Baha'i faith and you want your daughters to know, tell them about Martha Ruth, tell them about these women, because this is the example of a life of service. I want you to hear something. If I can figure out how to do this. All right, let's just look at some of these pictures and then we'll come back to this thing. Huh? This is
All
the
men.
Huh?
All men.
All men. And Martha Ruth. She's better than all those people put together. This is Martha Ruth in Tabriz. Yeah. This is Martha Ruth in Hamadan. By the way, I had written and sent to some of you an article. It's called Martha Ruth in Abade. This is a description of a young 10-year-old woman, child, who So they know that Martha Root is coming to visit the town, and it describes in 4 or 5 pages the excitement of the village, the excitement of the little town that Martha Root is going to come. I have a couple of copies of that article if you're interested. It's a wonderful reading. It makes you want to laugh. It makes you want to cry. There is a wonderful, I mean, when she went somewhere, she created excitement in places. Everybody has this thing about us versus them. You know, the Iranians versus the Americans, the foreigners. And yet, Martha Root was nothing like that. When Martha Root went, the people were excited about seeing Martha Root, especially the Baha'is. But she also had the wonderful advantage of being an American. And being an American had the advantage that she could go talk to the king or the vice president or the minister or something. What were they going to do? Imprison an American? That wasn't going to happen. So she had that advantage, and she took full advantage of her being an American. Martha Root in Cairo, Egypt. Martha Root in Beijing. This is Karachi, my hometown. All these people I probably met when they were in the 80s and 90s. I don't recognize anybody.
It's not a relative of yours standing in the back row, is it?
Not everybody with a mustache is related to me. In Australia. That's what she looked like. Friends, if we are going to ever think about serving the faith, we could do no worse than trying to follow the example of Martha Root. If we could accomplish 1/10 of what she did, we would have led a very good life. I had the voice of Martha Root. I wanted y'all to listen to her voice, but apparently I'm unable to do this. Questions, comments, thoughts, etc. Yeah? I will let one of the young people, younger than my age, figure out how to make this work.
Glory to thee, O God, for thy manifestation of love to mankind. O God, who art our life and life, guide thy servants to thy way, and make them rich in thee, and free from all sin. O God, teach them thy oneness, and give unto them a realization of thy unity, that they may see no one save thee. Thou art the merciful and the giver of bounty. O God, please in the heart of thy beloved the fire of thy love, that it may burn away the source of everything save thee. Reveal unto them, O God, thine exalted eternity, that thou hast ever been and will always be, and that there is no God save thee. Verily in thee will they find comfort and strength. Hallelujah.
Anybody have a prayer book handy? English. Dear friends, just remember, she was transformed by Abdu'l-Baha. And it is not possible for us to meet Abdu'l-Baha. But I want to read you something here, tablet of visitation for Abdu'l-Baha. I want you to think about this just for a minute. You cannot meet Abdu'l-Baha. She did. She got transformed by Abdu'l-Baha. You don't have that opportunity. But here's what he says. Whoso recited this prayer with lowliness and fervor will bring gladness and joy to the heart of the servant. It will be even as meeting him face to face. So that opportunity of meeting Abdu'l-Baha is here in the tablet of visitation for all of us. Thank you. Thank you all.